This is Movies on TV Podcast Industries with our spoiler-filled discussion on Spider-Man No Way Home.
Can't believe I'm in the Sanctum Sanctorum.
Neither can I.
So, how did you know you were made of magic? Because my Nana says that we have it in our family, and sometimes I get these tinglings in my hands.
You should talk to your physician.
Peter!
Hey.
I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. Listen, you just gotta help me find these guys.
You don't have to apologize, okay? You got us a second shot at MIT. It's fine.
So, how did the bad guys get here?
You screwed up a spell trying to get you into college.
Wait, what? I thought
did
it
it
was
with
the MIT
magic?
lady you saved.
No, that was after. Listen, let's just focus on the good news, okay?
No, let's just focus on the bad news. As of now, you have detected 0 multiversal trespassers. So, get on your phones, scour the internet, and Scooby-Doo this.
You're telling us what to do, even though all this is kind of your mess. You know, I know a couple of magic words myself, starting with the word please.
Welcome back, fellow movers. This is Movies on TV Podcast Industries, and we're spoiler-filled chatting, discussing in depth Spider-Man No Way Home. I am one of your hosts, Chris.
Yes, get out now if you haven't watched it. Get out now. It's going to be spoiler-filled. I'm one of your other hosts, Erik.
Yes, welcome back, fellow defenders. I am one of your other hosts, John.
Ooh, it's feeling like a Defenders kind of week this week, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Certainly is.
We weren't allowed to spoil this on our podcast for Hawkeye. I made you guys not spoil this on our podcast about Hawkeye. But oh my god, it's a week of awesome Defenders type appearances. Awesome stuff.
It is. So, again, final warning. If you have not watched Spider-Man No Way Home, turn off the podcast, go watch it. We'll wait.
Well, look, first as well, I am convinced my memory is not what it's used to be, so whether I can even recall anything since Tuesday, I have no idea.
Oh, that's fine. But hold on, let's give everyone 5 seconds to go, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, fellow defenders. We hope you enjoyed the film. Let's get into it, because
Are we excited?
We certainly are.
I didn't know what was going to happen in this film.
Yeah.
I went in going, okay, at a certain point I stopped watching all the trailers. I think I watched the main 2 trailers that came out. I didn't watch any of the additional TV spots. I couldn't because they were just slowly giving away more and more. And I was like, I want to go in somewhat fresh. We knew the rumors. We had heard the rumors that there were going to be additional Spider-Men and additional villains. And who knew what? There was rumors that someone major would die. There was rumors, all these additional and at a certain point I just stopped. I turned off.
You know, more than anything else we've covered, any movie, any Marvel movie that we've covered, any Marvel TV show, any of the TV shows we've covered, this is the one that feels like there was more stuff thrown at the wall to decide what was going to be in this movie, that the rumors that turned out to actually be true still surprised me, because so
definitely.
much had been talked about that was going to appear in this movie that it couldn't possibly fit into the runtime, no matter how long it was, that I was going, I don't even know which ones are true, which ones could possibly be true. So I was still surprised when I got there.
Definitely. I had multiple clenched fists and yes, in the cinema over this. And some of the stuff, like, I knew there was the talk of, you know, the alternate Spider-Man coming in, but at the same time, it was still a really pleasant surprise.
Oh, yeah.
So it was just really good. I loved it. This movie for me was awesome.
It was great. It was really good. And a huge thanks to Sony Pictures Ireland. We're not sponsored by them, but they did give us access to the premiere. We were able to go on Tuesday night in Ireland, as John mentioned earlier on. The reason why I'm going to say a huge thanks is because this is one of the biggest weeks we've had on TV Podcast Industries, because we're covering Hawkeye episode 5 this week. We're covering the penultimate episode of Wheel of Time. and got to go to the cinema and go see Spider-Man with all three of us, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's a massive amount of stuff, and we've also fitted in recording podcasts about each of those shows as well. So huge thanks to Sony for being able to allow us to go and see it early, and which has allowed us to do the podcast about it, basically. I have no idea how we'd be able to do that before Christmas.
And so for those who are listening, we're recording on the 17th.
Mm-hmm.
This has been we all still have full-time jobs,
Yep.
plus all this other stuff, plus the podcast, plus just actually watching the content. It has been bonkers, but this one was kind of worth it.
It certainly was. And one final thing, I've been doing the maths this week. Do you know this is our 100th podcast of this year?
Oh, God.
Yes!
Yeah, there you go.
I need a whiskey then, I think. I forget the pub quiz.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to go to the pub, I think.
We
at
are
this
literally
stage.
triple figures, folks. Triple figures.
This is the first year we've hit 100 podcasts. We did 80
That's
podcasts
mental.
in 2019, 82 podcasts last year, and that was the year of the pandemic, remember. We've done 20 more podcasts in this year, in 2021, than we've done in previous years. So happy 100th podcast of 2021, and happy 628th podcast of all time for TV.
It has to be more than that. 600 was last year, wasn't it?
We did 600 during the middle of this year.
Oh, okay.
Time is a flat circle.
Fellow defenders, I will be of absolutely no use on this podcast because, yes, my memory has gone bonkers.
It'll be all good. It'll be all good.
But let's go test John's memory, because I want to go in and talk about this film.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we get into the synopsis, but Derek, do you want to tell us who gave us what with this movie of Spider-Man No Way Home?
Absolutely. Returning once again for his third go at Spider-Man, Jon Watts returns. This is the third one in this series of Spider-Man, of course. The 27th MCU movie as well. This movie was written by Chris McKenna and Erik Sommers. Both had writing credits on Ant-Man and the Wasp. Both also had writing credits on the screenplay for Homecoming and were the writers on Spider-Man Far From Home. But remember, this is a large team that's involved in the Spider-Man team, so there are more writing credits, but those are the two main ones, and applicable to all the Spider-Man movies. So great to have them back in here. Can I quickly just run through some of the cast for this movie as our first spoiler for what's coming up? Once again, returning the main triumvirate of this movie series. We got Tom Holland returning as Peter Parker, Zendaya wonderfully returning as MJ, and Jacob Batalon once again returning as Ned in a great role. We have Benedict Cumberbatch coming on board in here. Benedict Wong coming on board as Wong. Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan. We have Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon or Electro. Alfred Molina as Otto Octavius. Doc Ock. Willem Dafoe returning as Norman Osborn. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. And Gura Rice as Betty Brant in a blink and you'll miss it, but excellent cameo. And Tony Revolori with a dyed haircut as Flash Thompson as well. And we did see a little bit of Mr. Harrington and Mr. Dell. Martin Starr returning as Mr. Harrington, and J.B. Smoove returning as Mr. Dell in the school, creating their homage to Spider-Man in there as well.
And the coach.
Yes.
So with all of those amazing people, and many more, which we'll talk about in a bit, John, do you want to tell us what these titans of the industry gave us with your synopsis?
That's Chris spoiling how much he liked this movie right there.
Slightly.
Sure. His identity revealed, Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, and MJ try to escape the glare of the media's spotlight, and J. Jonah Jameson. Pursued by the Department of Damage Control, not even the help from his lawyer, Matt Murdock, can ease the intrusion of the identity of Spider-Man. As it begins to affect the futures of Peter, MJ, and Ned when their university applications to MIT are rejected because of the controversy, Peter asks Dr. Stephen Strange if he can help. A spell exists that may be the answer to Peter's problems. Deep in the Sanctum Sanctorum, and despite Wong's warnings, Doctor Strange casts a spell that will make people forget Peter is Spider-Man. But it is a tricky and dangerous spell, skirting the boundaries of reality. As Strange begins casting, Peter keeps requesting alterations to the spell, which causes it to become corrupted and run out of control. While Strange manages to contain the failing spell, weird things begin to happen in New York City, and they all appear to be focused on Spider-Man. As Peter tries to convince an MIT administrator to accept Ned's and MJ's applications, he is suddenly attacked by Doc Ock, aka Otto Octavius, who he manages to disarm, and then by the Green Goblin, who manages to escape. He brings Doc Ock back to the Sanctum, where he is placed in a holding cell next to Kirk Connors in his lizard form. But both adversaries don't recognize this world's Peter Parker. Doctor Strange reveals that the spell has begun bringing visitors from the multiverse who know that Peter is Spider-Man into their world. Armed with this knowledge, and with the help of MJ and Ned, Peter decides to help capture any other possible visitors. Spider-Man manages to find and capture Electro, aka Max Dillon, and Flint Marko, still in his Sandman form. While Peter wants to save Doc Ock, Electro, Sandman, and Lizard, Doctor Strange believes they should be returned to their universe to meet their fate. But with Peter's greatest adversary, Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, still at large, Norman uses his split personality and Peter's desire to help others for his own ends, trashing Peter's plan and unleashing tragic events for Peter Parker. With Aunt May killed and Peter desolate, MJ and Ned rally to help, releasing Doctor Strange from the mirror dimension and recruiting 2 friendly neighborhood visitors to his aid as they face off against his enemies at the Statue of Liberty. In the final battle, the Spider-Men manage to cure their villains. At Peter's request, Strange fixes the spell, sending the alternate Spider-Men and their villains back to their universes while making everyone forget Peter's existence.
Oh, what a sad ending.
I know.
For Peter, but what a ride of a movie.
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
What a film. And I know it's one of the tough ones. I'm going to try to withhold, and I will speak critically of it in certain parts, but critical eye, just knowing, going in, this had nostalgia. This had class character, good writing, the MCU Kevin Feige touch, and a kitchen sink for good measure. Mm-hmm. And it was coherent, and it wasn't a complete mess.
Exactly.
With all the rumors we had heard, and even just rereading, listening to that synopsis, you go, there's no way that film works. It's just so much going on over the course of 2.5 hours. But it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had tears. I had whoops. So for any of our American listeners, in the cinemas in Ireland, you don't really get the claps or the whoops or the jeers or the hoorays or the boos or anything like that. It's in Ireland, you kind of watch the film. I nearly wanted to punch the air at parts. I nearly wanted to go, oh my god, like literally OMG it.
That's one of Spider-Man's villains, the air. That's why Chris wanted to punch him.
It was. It's the blue air. But anyway, let's get into our multiversal adventure. So since this is that, instead of our usual top 5, we're going to do it by incursions. So the first incursion is basically the ending. We move directly from the end of Far From Home straight into No Way Home.
Yes,
with our first point, which is essentially that. It is Spider-Man is revealed and Strange is a bit strange and has a spell.
You know, it was interesting. I was looking back on the 3 movies that have been out for Spider-Man, and isn't it really interesting? We've said before, Chris, you are the Spider-Man fan, but in the MCU, you are a fan of Iron Man. And in the first movie, it was Spider-Man and Iron Man. The second movie, I've said many times before, I'm the Nick Fury fan. Second movie was Spider-Man with Nick Fury. And then this movie comes out, and it is John, the biggest Doctor Strange fan that I know in the world, let alone just in the podcast. And this movie is Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Like, are they aiming it at Defenders TV podcast as it was?
Pretty much.
Aiming it at
I think
TV
so.
Podcast industries? The obviously kickoff of this is directly leading from the end of the last movie. What is the impact if everyone in the world knows your name? Which I think is a nice meta commentary on Tom Holland himself. He's now at that point where he is so famous he can't go anywhere. himself and Zendaya are together as a couple in real life, and they are constantly hounded by the press all the time. And I like that they've been able to incorporate his life into the movie a little bit. Like, I don't think it's as bad as what happens to Spider-Man, to be honest. But I love that they've been able to show that impact before taking some comic book action to correct it, I suppose.
And I think that's also part of the initial homecoming was, we don't know if there's always the discussion, which we're not sure Spider-Man can hold his own completely just yet in the MCU. So let's keep him with Iron Man. Let's keep that connection going based on Civil War. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. And number two, with Nick Fury, they started leaning more into the comic book. Okay, what would happen in this situation? Well, if this was in the comic book, you would have S.H.I.E.L.D., so just bring in the S.H.I.E.L.D. folk.
Exactly, and I think that was the last cartoon iteration, the last animated cartoon iteration of Spider-Man was with him working with S.H.I.E.L.D. He was working with Coulson and working with Nick Fury quite regularly. So, so that connection for younger viewers is already established in cartoons, This is being pulled from multiple kind of places as sources, which they always do. Yeah. So like Happy Birthday, One More Day, and a couple of others. And definitely, and in those comic books, you do have Peter Parker going, this is an issue. Do you know what? I'm going to go to Strange. Do you know what? I'm going to go here. Because we have that MCU set up, and pretty sure no one was watching this film and goes, who's that guy with the cape? Mm-hmm. I think we're now at a part in cultural phenomenon of the MCU where most people know Benedict Cumberbatch is Doctor Strange. And if they haven't seen him in Doctor Strange, they've probably seen him in the Avengers at the end. He's connected enough that people are like, oh yeah, not like, who's that guy flying through the air and why is he moving his hands?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So now we can, and that's always been the way with comic books. Like, pretty sure, even if I did not read Strange for years, I knew who Doctor Strange was.
Exactly.
So we're at that situation. So in here, seeing Spider-Man kind of go through all this, and those first few scenes where he's trying to go to school, where he's getting home, where you basically have this, being pulled into the damage control, pulled into the police station, or kind of, I think it's a police station with damage control, interrogating him.
Definitely the police. Yeah. Absolutely. And I know we saw damage control back in Homecoming. That was where they were first introduced into the MCU. But I thought they were more the construction company that fixed things up. But damage control may have expanded quite significantly.
Well, that was the bit. So theoretically, damage control was always the guys that they were the government agent that came in and fixed things, and make there was a mess. They kind of clean up the mess of superhero or supervillain kind of battles and things. So this looks like they're going a bit further on the FBI, CIA kind of level of things where they're kind of interrogating and doing stuff.
And remember, it's a comedy comic as well. Like the Damage Control comic books is total comedy. It's it is not treated as something serious to be pulled in by Damage Control. So
no, and I think what we're seeing here is potentially a version of, we no longer have a S.H.I.E.L.D. in the universe. We no longer have an agency that can look into this stuff. Mm-hmm. So here is an agency that can look into this stuff.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I think that's all they were kind of there for, really, was that it was Peter Parker being revealed as Spider-Man, and it's then the consequences of the additional element that these drones that were part of Stark Tech and ultimately were commanded by Peter Parker. Mm-hmm. So it was the damage. So I guess it's a bit like Interpol, where, I don't know, someone in London, when we need damage control to come in and deal with that, because they basically took down historical monuments, I guess, in Far From Home. Mm-hmm. So it was all kind of leading, but I mean, it's basically, it's that big moment, or continuing that moment of his reveal. We're just bringing it back to, where he goes to school, his family life with Aunt May, and I guess to some extent Happy Hogan, and all of that. Again, for me on this bit, it just felt like a continuation of the second movie to some degree. It expanded on it because it impacted MJ and Ned and all of that. Yeah. And that's what was good about it, is that because Spider-Man is that hero that wants to do good, it is about his close to home, ultimately, about his neighborhood, and these are his closest friends and his girlfriend. So it is personal for Spider-Man, but it's personal in terms of how it's affecting others, because that is who Peter Parker is, who wants to help. And so that's what really sort of grabbed me. Yeah. It was, and it affected his Aunt May. Yeah. And so I thought this was really nice. It was really true to the character. And of course, the other thing I'm going to pull from this, and I'm just going to get it off there and out there, is because it introduced us to Matt Murdock. In an MCU movie.
Yep.
Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, our first Defenders TV podcast, Marvel character that we ever covered from the Marvel Netflix. And I was so happy. I so wanted to talk about it on Hawkeye with Vincent D'Onofrio's. I've been practicing.
Well done.
Vincent D'Onofrio's character, Kingpin, and coming in there. And this was just so much more than that. It wasn't a fuzzy grain. It was Matt Murdock, and I loved the fact that he caught the brick midair when he was around their kitchen table, and you could see Peter just looking at him kind of quizzically, and he says, "I'm a good lawyer."
Fantastic.
Quality.
Fantastic.
Loved it. One of my first big kind of clench fist yes moments of this movie. 100%. I was just like so happy.
I was so excited to see Charlie Cox back in the role that he made so much his own, that Kevin Feige coming out and saying he will be our Daredevil, you'll see him sometime in the future. I just wasn't expecting it. I don't care about all the rumors. I don't care how much I said I hope he's going to be in this movie. I really was not expecting it until the moment they were brought in for interrogation. And they said, I need a lawyer. And I went, oh, please let this be Matt Murdock. It's great to have that justified. And this movie is full of things for fans. This is absolutely something that is made for people who are fans of the MCU and of Spider-Man movies. It's made for them. I'm not too sure whether, if you're not that invested in it, whether it's for you, because it is really paying off for fans to have fun. That's really what it's all about. And this is the first moment in the movie which just felt like, this is for you guys. You've hung around for 4 years looking for Daredevil season 4. Here you go. Here's Matt Murdock. He's in the MCU.
I was thinking, from our Hawkeye episode this week, one of our, very early supporters, Ronaldo, who now also has his own podcast, it said that his waters broke with the arrival of Kingpin in Hawkeye. I'm expecting he will give birth, ultimately, with the arrival of Matt Murdock. Yeah. And who only knows what will happen when the Moon Knight TV show happens. But again, I think this is just like fantastic for people that loved that Daredevil show to see that. And it's just really nicely placed in this movie.
Absolutely. Let's bring it back a little bit to Spider-Man itself as a movie, because overall I love the flow that Jon Watts has given to these movies, where we are, the first movie being about the high school experience, the second movie about being your first trip abroad with the school experience, and this movie really focusing, and if you think about it, the central focus to this is the application to college for these kids. They are all leaving, they're all breaking up, they're all at the end of this year going to be moving on from each other. Yet MJ and Ned and Peter have made this pact to all try and apply to MIT so they can all stay together when they move off from high school into the future world, effectively. So it is all... So that is all the impact that's coming from the reveal of who Peter Parker is. This has impacted them completely personally. They've lost the opportunity to go to MIT because they've helped him out and they've been his guy in the chair and his girlfriend, respectively. So I love that they've brought that back to a really close personal issue for Spider-Man. That's how he works so well in the comic books, and that's how he's worked so well on screen, to always make it a personal issue for the character.
That is the thing about Spider-Man. It's heart-based kind of stories. So even any of the clone conspiracy ones, any of the things like that, it's all about direct linkages to Spider-Man. Yeah. Very, very few are Avengers level threats. The Earth's going to be destroyed. It's all very friendly neighborhood. And as part of that, the neighborhood is also his family, and there's connections there. So keeping this was just, it was a clever way to move the story to its own natural point. Exactly. In that they all get defined.
He ultimately is a street level hero. I mean, I know he goes to space. I know he's worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. He's gone beyond Queens in New York, but it is that element that his starting point is that street level hero, and that's what's really good here.
Exactly, and not only is that the kind of impact that the reveal has had, that's also what knocks everything off its axis effectively, because him going to Doctor Strange, because he's had that relationship with him from the Avengers movies and from that experience fighting Thanos, him going to him asking for a spell to make everybody in the world forget his name. It's his love of the people that are around him that knocks everything off course. It's that he wants to make sure that MJ remembers that he's Spider-Man, because that was a really tough week for him. And he wants to make sure that Aunt May remembers who he is, because that was really tough. And he doesn't want to go and do that again. He doesn't want to reveal to her again. That was really tough. Oh, but what about Ned, my best friend? He also needs to remember, and all of that spilling out of Peter Parker because he's so concerned about that core family group that he has around him is what ruins the spell that Doctor Strange is casting, and kicks the world into a brand new multiverse, which again is really central to that Peter Parker character, everything being localized to him and his really close family.
Yeah, no, and it was so much fun to see that whole part where he's like, happy. No, I'm not particularly happy, but we can talk about this later. It's just all of these, again, this is where some of the writing comes in. So these guys, they nail the dialogue of this.
Definitely.
So before we actually jump into Strange, I have one very quick point. They're tearing down Stark Industries. Now that Iron Man's gone, for part of the MCU, the legacy of Stark is kind of being worn away. Because here we see that based on Spider-Man's connection to Stark Industries and these and Peter being left to the drones and stuff, huge raids and searches are happening with Stark. Pepper Potts doesn't do anything, doesn't state anything. Happy's pulled in with a photo as chief of security. They're pulling, and I get it. We're at a point now we need to move beyond Stark Industries, so there will be potentially a Rand Industries or another massive industries put in its place.
Or, since we have Armor Wars and Ironheart as TV shows coming up, will there be a fight back to regain control of Stark Industries?
Oh, there you go. That's why they're doing this.
Yeah, who have some connection to the Iron Man armor,
but
not
there you
Tony
go.
Stark.
Yeah. Okay. I was going. They're really not they're pulling, but that's why they're doing everything's going to be destroyed and sold off, and then it's on Rhodey and to go off and pull everything back. There you are. Yeah. Anyway, now let's move on to the abracadabra in the room. Or actually, I should say the abracadabra in the... Is it Mephisto? Because he fires off fire and it's just ice everywhere. It has to be Mephisto.
No Mephisto's here.
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I was very happy with this. And actually, the best part is they changed... From what we had seen earlier, this scene, they had changed the introduction of Stephen Strange to Spider-Man, or the reintroduction, or the introduction of this film of Stephen Strange.
Absolutely. The speculation on YouTube and other podcasts and our own probably as well, when people saw the trailer and Stephen Strange was acting the way he was. I think I even said it myself that he just doesn't feel like the Stephen Strange that was in Scott Derrickson's movie or in the Avengers movie. He has a playful attitude. He's a really overconfident, arrogant kind of character, and I absolutely didn't come across in the trailers. He seemed like somebody that was pushing the boundaries against his teacher or something. The fact that they were putting that out there in the trailers just to give you an idea of why things were going wrong makes total sense. The fact that it wasn't in the final movie, and it does feel like the Stephen Strange we've seen in all the other movies is fantastic. I'm so happy that Stephen Strange still feels like Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that was a red herring. I'm really pleased they got rid of the wink, and
the nudge,
and they changed the conversation. I mean, ultimately, it was kind of the same, but they ultimately changed that conversation between Strange and Wong with Peter around this spell that, you've effectively got Wong saying, "Don't cast it," and I guess there would be an arrogance there to say, well, wink, I'm going to do it anyway. But, he won't do stuff frivolously. Yeah. So it just wouldn't make sense that. And so I'm glad that ultimately, whilst this spell was flagged as, well, you've got to be careful with it because it skirts these realities and quite dark magic.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that Wong said, don't do. He says, I'm just not going to be around for this or to do that because they'd used it before for other stuff. There's great, like for a party in the Sanctum. So, you kind of go.
Do you remember the party in the Sanctum, Wong? No, exactly.
So it was really good. Plus, then it kind of, you were wondering, what does he mean that it's Peter's fault? So you were kind of, when Strange was saying, well, it's your fault, you didn't get that sense from the trailer. But I mean, in the movie, as you would expect, it has time to breathe and you have the full thing there in front of you. And so I just loved Tom Holland kind of just interjecting all the time and saying, what about MJ? What about Ned? What about Aunt May? Yep. All this. I don't want them to forget me in this way because they're important. And you see Strange sort of having to do another new thread of the spell to take into account this, where it gets way too much information and he can't contain it. And the effect of that was just great. I love that. Yeah. And then having the rings of that spell contained in a little mirror dimension, hexagonal, it was just lovely. I thought it was really cool. The other thing I really want to say on this is I am absolutely delighted that Wong is the Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh yes, big reveal.
That is
a big confirmation.
That is massive, and I think it's really, really important because I love Stephen Strange, and I think it shows a great evolution of the character to have Wong as the Sorcerer Supreme because he deserves to be that. Absolutely. And that was to me just beautiful and so understated but so impactful for me. So hats off that they've done that for me. And I really want to see a Wong movie, quite frankly. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wong's cool.
Awesome.
Like Grills is cool, but Wong is cool. If you've listened to our Hawkeye podcast, you'll know what I mean.
That's true. If you haven't, you may not.
Yeah. If not, go and listen to it.
Yeah, but this pretty much leads directly into incursion number 2. This spell that's been cast by Doctor Strange and going completely off course leads into our villains. For this movie, how they get over from one side of the multiverse to another. Do you want to talk about the villains that have been pulled in, Chris? These are the big villains that we've seen in previous Spider-Man movie.
This was it was such a clever way of doing it. So where everything's fine, and it's basically Strange goes, I'm assuming you spoke to the college first. And it was like, no, I didn't know I could do that.
I know.
My boy, go. So we do
You've
see-
asked me to do this spell and you haven't even picked up the phone. Oh my god.
I love that again. It just speaks to Peter not knowing that as an adult you can actually just call up other adults and go, "How about you reconsider me?" You know,
Yeah.
You know, you're an adult now. You can make those decisions.
Let's talk about this like adults. And that leads to the bridge. Basically, well, it leads to him calling Flash, him having to agree that he is Flash's best friend. A couple of bits of swinging around, and he tells him that the college missions point of contact, the person is on her way back to the airport. So he swings out to the bridge, and upon getting there and introducing this woman and kind of having a quick discussion, and very Peter, like, before she even could say anything, he just launches into his tirade of why this is important, and oh my god, blah, blah, blah. We see his Spidey tingle. Mm-hmm. I still hate they call it that, but
the Peter
anyway.
tingle, it's great.
The Peter tingle.
What would you call it, Chris?
Spider sense.
Exactly.
It always will be Spider sense. But it's Doc Ock. Alfred Rameau, Lee Nab, ladies and gentlemen. Slightly de-aged.
Oh yeah.
Like, properly. And it points throughout the film better than others.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether he left his house in England, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with the de-aging and the CGI, but I'm not sure whether Alfred Molina was ever actually
honestly,
in
it was,
anything other than sitting in his chair at home and his face was put onto a CGI model. But it worked really well.
It did. And it did, like...
I didn't get that at all,
Really?
but anyway,
Really?
there we go.
Because he even had the comic accurate haircut, and I'm not sure whether Alfred Molina would have had that
allowed
haircut.
them to do that. Yeah. No, they definitely pulled it in. But we do get this quite intense, fun battle. Mm-hmm. And we get essentially the octopus arms pulling in the nanotech from the suit, the advanced suit, and merging with the nanotech, allowing Peter to essentially take over and take control of the arms.
Disarm.
Disarm.
There we say it.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
It's a nice way. And allowing a very cocky Peter to literally go, well, I've got this. You can't do that.
Absolutely.
And like basically gets the MIT bit overturned, which is a success. The woman says, "You're a hero, Peter. We're going to reconsider this. I will make everyone reconsider this. And your friends. Mm-hmm. Like, you are going to MIT." And then a fellow scientist, if you will, turns up. None other than William Dafoe. We knew this was coming. We had seen the pumpkin bomb roll across the bridge in previous trailers. But that introduction...
But isn't that the thing which is I find fascinating, because the introduction to these characters, in a sense, aren't the characters. It is the mechanical arm from Doc Ock.
Yeah.
And that mechanical sound of it extending as it comes crashing into the road surface.
Yeah.
And it's the view of the pumpkin bomb hitting, the sound of it hitting, and that sound of it kind of charging up to explode. Yeah. And you go, oh, I know who we're going to get here. And it's just like, I mean, these two are just like absolutely my favorite. There's no, it's nothing as such related to Electro or Sandman Lizard, but I think in this movie these two are really, really good.
Yep.
And you get that just purely from inert stuff. It's really, really amazing. I love it.
That nostalgia is powerful, man.
Definitely. And I mean, it's a real shame actually that the Lizard was as the Lizard in that form, because I didn't get the voice actually, because it didn't even sound like Rhys Ifans from the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Yeah. And I was thinking, oh, have they got him back? And ultimately they had when he was cured. But I kind of wish they had him phasing between being Kurt and the Lizard. And the same with Sandman, because it was simply him as the Sandman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a shame that because it felt like, I mean, and it's an interesting choice, isn't it? Because it's like, I guess it's cheaper now to do CGI of a sand person and a lizard person than have the actors on screen for that time. I'm guessing that's the choice of it, because I would have thought the opposite thing. But
I don't think that's the choice. I think simply, look, we will be completely honest. We're movie fans or MCU fans and Spider-Man fans. I think it's pretty clear for most fans. The number one Spider-Man live action movie is Spider-Man 2. Alfred Molina's performance as Doc Ock is pretty much up there as one of the best villain performances in all of the MCU, and definitely in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then I think Willem Dafoe playing the most iconic of Spider-Man villains is definitely up there as your other choice. You either like one of those two as your lead one. The Amazing Spider-Man movies, we'll talk about them a little bit more as we get through the podcast, obviously, but the Amazing Spider-Man movies are a bit maligned. With Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, they're a little bit more maligned. People didn't like them as much as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movies. So your lead villain in the first Amazing Spider-Man was Lizard. So of course he's going to appear in here in some form, but not as well known, I suppose. And then Electro was lead villain in Amazing Spider-Man 2. So he's going to appear in there. Sandman in the most maligned of, I think, all five of them in Spider-Man 3. He was the kind of lead villain until Venom turned up in that movie as well, and the other 25 villains that were in that movie. But that's the kind of order of preference, I suppose, for Spider-Man fans. They're the ones that people want to see on screen. You want to see Willem Dafoe back in Green Goblin. You want to see Alfred Molina back as Doc Ock. And then everybody else is great. But what they did with Electro in this movie, giving Jamie Foxx the role that they gave him in this movie, is also fantastic. Yeah. I love that they gave him so much more to do. And everybody, really. I know you're saying a lot of it was CGI for Sandman and Lizard, but everybody got their moment and everybody got something really good to do and a reason to be there. It wasn't that they just went, here's every single villain, let's stick them on screen. They gave everybody something really interesting.
No, that's not what I was saying. It was, I wanted the actor to be on the screen as well, to recognize theirs. I didn't think it detracted, because you're right. Sandman, had a lot in here, certainly with the sort of the capture of Electro. You have Sandman here. It was more actually Lizard that probably got the rawest deal in terms of having been captured by Strange and put in the holding cell basically merged in with the cell walls, because he's green and they were kind of like grey. So
I love there's even the joke in there from MJ and Ned going, I thought he was a dinosaur.
Yeah.
They haven't even investigated who this character is at all.
But that was the great thing about it, because, we say things like much maligned and what have you, but isn't it great? It's like, it's refreshing that the tongue-in-cheek element that Ned brings, and with MJ and with Tom Holland as Peter Parker here. They had the running joke with the names around Doc Ock and Otto Octavius, where they do the little snigger. And it actually, to me, we say much maligned, but this then, it just felt like it brought them into the circle of love, dare I say it. And I think that goes with probably when we talk about Incursion 3. So I really like this. And I have to say, Green Goblin was just perfect for me here. I think William Dafoe doing the split personality of Norman Osborn, and just how that played out in this movie, how significant it was. Because, I think there is a point with me where I was like, it's not that I wasn't liking the movie, but there was something where I was like, I'm not really connecting just yet. And I think with everything that happened with the introduction with the characters, and in particular with William Dafoe squirming his way into the affections of Aunt May, and what then transpires, and how ultimately ruthless this villain of Spider-Man's is, was just perfect.
Absolutely.
And the whole scene in the apartment where, because Peter is trying to cure them as well. Again, really, to me, that felt really true to Peter's character and Spider-Man's character. I like that it caused the tension with Doctor Strange. You get the astral plane thing, which is just, I'll never tire of that.
The Mirrorverse.
You have the Mirrorverse. You have all the bendy skyscrapers and everything that Scott Derrickson introduced in Doctor Strange. It was a real nice kind of ride as well.
Absolutely.
Because at the time that the trailers were all thinking, oh, is this evil Doctor Strange, or whatever. And so it was just really good. But I thought it all linked so nicely together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for me, everything about these villains, the introductions, the rationale, and the performances. Molina, Defoe, and to a lesser extent, like the rest of them. Like, so initially for me, the Tobey Maguire trilogy are the ones that I grew up with. They were my first, oh my god, Spider-Man's on screen. The Andrew Garfield ones I still enjoyed. They're not as iconic. From a villain perspective. I'm just saying from a villain perspective. But how they use them throughout this film, in that they're all brought here, and then the realization that they're all dead in their own universes.
Yeah.
And then that's how they create this fracture between Strange and Spider-Man. That, like, it is, Spider-Man is like, well, also because of Aunt May, but it would play on his sensibilities.
Yeah.
I can't send them back to die. I have to try and at least attempt to save them.
Yeah.
All this leading further and further to the crushing battle, essentially the crushing battle in the apartment block.
Yeah.
Which, for me, this was a moment I was never expecting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was one of the first times I've seen Aunt May die on screen. She's died in the comic books and she's been brought back multiple times.
Yeah.
Like, I saw her die once and I thought, oh my god, they're killing and she's off for, they told us it was forever. No one dies in comic books forever anymore. But on this lead, I was like, they're never going to do it. They're not going to kill Melissa Tomei. They're not good. Like, she's their Aunt May, and they're gonna keep her there as this additional grounding rod for Peter.
Yeah.
Like, they'll figure something out. If anyone, I thought Ned was a gunner. I thought it was Ned. Or if they were gonna kill MJ and introduce Gwen.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
No,
couldn't do it.
So when you get to this, and you get this beautiful battle, like, in that fight scene, like, between Goblin and Electro and Doc Ock, curing Doc Ock, and everything in between, all of these for great, like, just this whole second act culminating with the death of Aunt May. And the iteration of the origin of with great power comes great responsibility. Coming from Aunt May in that, but us hearing the birth of that from how that happens, and also then playing back later to finding out, that was also probably something that she had heard from Uncle Ben
maybe
previously.
Yeah.
All of these things just crushing who Peter is. Because by the end of this film, Peter Parker is not the man he was at the beginning of this film.
Not at
Well,
all.
that's
And
it.
never will be.
That's it. Whatever about the Stark Industries kind of being gradually picked apart. This was the picking apart of Peter Parker. Pickled per whatever it is. I mean,
A piece of Peter Parker pickled.
Exactly. And absolutely fair dues to Tom Holland, because his acting chops are amazing because he can do that comedy, he can do that action, and it looks effortless. And here, like, just the pain that you see etched on his face is really good. And you know, again, like you say, Chris, the Aunt May, that I was not expecting that. That was for me the biggest shock. It was the thing that elicited the biggest emotional response. Yeah. And I thought I had that big response sort of just a few moments before, because there is that moment as when William Dafoe, well, Norman Osborn, sort of engulfed by the Green Goblin, is fighting Peter Parker in the apartment hallway. Mm-hmm. And some of the direction on that was superb. It felt really scary. It felt really intense. And the great thing about it is that, you know, Doc Ock and the Goblin, they are intense. They're really evil. I mean, the Goblin is devious. He is ruthless. And the same with Doc Ock. And it's not to say that Spider-Man hasn't encountered those kind of people, but it is from those earlier films, almost like a different level of these are villains. This is the black and white villain, but done so well by the actors. Exactly. And like, it was just the grin and the grimace, that mad grin from William Dafoe as he's fighting Peter Parker. And it feels like this Peter Parker hasn't experienced that visceral evilness. Yeah, I mean, he's had Thanos, I get it, but it's all kind of grand scale. This is personal, it's intimate, and it felt it in that corridor, and some of the camera work was really cool. I loved it. Loved it.
There was one particular scene where they spun the camera as Peter and Goblin are fighting. So I think it's Peter gets smashed into the ground, and then he pulls his legs up and pushes and flips backwards with the Goblin to basically essentially land the Goblin on his back, or vice versa. But the camera stays with them in center frame. So the whole camera, basically the world, the landscape spins when they stay the same. Yeah. Just. Yeah. Really yeah. Like, but you're talking about the visceral. This fight scene was visceral. Like, you could hear the punches and the cracks, and it's echoed later on as well in a later, very later fight scene. But it was bone crunching, and they obviously, and the sound direction on this with the certain music pulled way down, the sound effects pulled way up, and the ambient noise. Yeah.
It was really well done.
Just like, almost like that, like, din. It was all done so that it was a din, like the blood's rushing to your ears.
Yeah, it almost had the same effect as Saving Private Ryan on the beach. It was kind of where they moved in and out of the ambient background noise to the sound of the fight to what they were saying. And it sort of felt muffled, but at the same time, really intense sound. It was phenomenally good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really to do with how many films have been filmed since these characters appeared before in Spider-Man movies, how many great movies have been done, and how the contribution of the MCU to cinema over the last 20 years since those movies were done allows you to give Willem Dafoe these amazing moments in an MCU movie. You know, he's playing the role again, but completely differently, still keeping the essence of the character, but still being really scary in this movie. Really, really good. Last comment really on the villains is just about that little extra thing of Electro. I actually thought Electro was given a really good role as the initial villain when we thought Doc Ock and Norman Osborn were kind of teaming up with Spider-Man to sort everything out. We had Electro coming from the previous world where he was a nerd who was treated terribly, ended off as a villain created by electric eels in a pond, and looked terribly. Now he's looking like Jamie Foxx and wants to stay this way and wants to be in this better universe for him. And he felt like a villain standalone in this movie at the beginning. And I really liked that they set him up as the villain kind of for the first half until we had Norman Osborn coming on as the real villain for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and powered by the arc reactor was just genius.
What a
I
great
loved that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the fact we still had the Sandman that we remember from Spider-Man 3, the idea that this is a guy that will always just try to get back to his family, but will be willing to help. He doesn't think of himself as a bad guy. He's still trying to help Peter. But if it stands in his way of getting back to his family, he's going to turn on him, basically, which is the kind of central part of Clint Marco. So I like that they kept that as well. But really well treated the villains in the movie.
Yeah.
100%. And that moves us into incursion number 3. A gaggle of Spider-Man, a soliloquy of Spider-Man, a song of Spider-Man, a web of Spider-Man. There we go. But we'll end with that. That was the DLC cuts, the outtakes. But yes, a web of Spider-Man as the incursion number 3. Because Peter Parker is broken by the end of Act 2. Mm-hmm. And as we lead into Act 3, this Peter does not know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because there's 2 other Peter Parkers. And we haven't mentioned this, but Ned takes the sling ring from the Sanctum Sanctorum with him. So Ned opens a portal to find Peter because his granny said he's always magic, so he's trying, and it kind of works. So he keeps going and tries to ask for Peter, and that scene where you see Andrew Garfield come through, where it is the alleyway of New York, where it looks like one of the comic books where it's Spider-Man No More, and it's an iconic cover book where it's Peter Parker walking away silhouetted, and his spider suit is in the bin. And we've seen that in Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3. We've seen it been done before. It's been done on film.
It's probably the most used image of Spider-Man and every other superhero who's ever given up their identity. That exact same image is used with their costume in the bin. Yeah, it's definitely a totally iconic image. But Ned Leeds, the magic user. Come on, welcome aboard, Ned Leeds, on the trail to become Sorcerer Supreme in 20 years. Because technically he was able to use the sling ring, the ability to open up portals quicker than Doctor Strange was. So I think he's got more magic powers than he's letting on. This is just the start of them.
I was delighted for this development. Love Ned, and I'm so glad that he can pull a rabbit out of a hat and use the sling ring.
It's a Spider-Man from another universe.
He can sling a spell.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Although Ned does say to Peter Parker, I won't become one of your villains. Mm-hmm. And you're just like going, is that too on the nose? Maybe he will. Mm-hmm. I hope he doesn't. But I would love to see Ned be a significant magic user.
100%. Mm-hmm. But like they focused a bit strangely on his granny's green cloak that she was sewing, and then there was a load of knives on and kind of swords on the wall. So there is something. I'm sure someone's going to find that Easter egg and who his granny is, some spellcaster from the Marvel universe.
Maybe, or just a sword thrower, I guess.
Or a sword thrower. She could be a sword swallower. Who knows? We're not going to just limit her to do what she does with the swords. But based on that, which is very cool, and I'm glad, we find that both Spider-Men have been in the universe. They were pulled in at the same time, or around the same time as the other villains, and have been wandering, looking for Peter, being just their spidey sense telling them he needs them. And basically, we get the introduction of Andrew as Peter Parker, and the very fun, can you go get that web in the corner?
Very fun,
Very fun introductions.
Yeah.
All of that just culminating, and then Toby coming in. Like, this for me was just...
It was, brilliant.
It was so well done.
Yeah.
And it's just, they could have done it so worse. Like, it could have been campy. It could have been, like, just... I don't know. This was just I think the best way to put it had a bit of comedic elements. It also had that heart, which you expect from the Ned and MJ scenes. And then just also you got reintroduced to those two characters, or the two characters of those Spider-Men, and you remember why Andrew Garfield was the way he was, because he has that kind of a bit of a cool Spider-Man. He was still a nerd and a geek and a scientist, but he was always that kind of slightly cooler kind of Peter Parker. And then you get this aged, grizzled Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
Who's been doing this for years.
He hasn't aged that much, though, Toby, at all.
No.
I have to say the order in which they introduced them made a lot of sense as well, introducing Andrew Garfield, so you get that great performance that he gave as his Spider-Man and his Peter Parker. You get that in isolation. I think that works really, really well. And then getting Tobey Maguire, when you think, oh, maybe they actually did get only Andrew Garfield, which is a great get anyway. Yeah. And then you get even more excited. You know, you mentioned earlier on that Irish cinemas, you tend not to have those kind of visceral reactions that you get in American cinemas to movies. This is the point where I would expect, if you're in a big audience of Marvel fans, that people would be whooping and hollering about, oh my God, they did get Tobey Maguire back for the movie, and we've just seen him in here, and they have a great interplay between those two characters on their own with MJ and Ned of this universe. And then eventually we get a meeting of everybody with Tom Holland. So I kind of like that we get them all in their own isolated forms, I suppose, until they all get to meet together as the three Spider-Men.
I agree. I think that's the great thing about it. They gave both Spider-Mans their moment in this movie. Yep. Then together as the elder statesman, if you will, of the franchise. Mm-hmm. And then with the new kid on the block, so to speak. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that. I have to say, I'm not going to lie. I have a soft spot for The Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I love it.
I really, really enjoyed those movies. And I really liked Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Peter Parker. It felt like he was saying you could be nerdy and cool, in a sense. And I like the fact that, you know, that they just had, like you say, they had the emotional bang with Garfield. I thought he came across so well, and could take the tongue-in-cheek stuff. I loved all the tongue-in-cheek stuff because, I mean, at the end of the day, not so much with Garfield's, but certainly with Tobey Maguire's, you know, they were closer to the millennium. So they're quite old movies at this stage, certainly in terms of effects and all that. And even just, I guess, what they're prepared to do possibly in these kind of movies as storytelling. And I just loved that these guys were up for the tongue-in-cheek aspects, but not to compromise what they did. And in fact, actually, probably just to help magnify it even more. And I was like, fair dues. I loved, I have to say, dare I say it, with the gasp of Aunt May's death, which I thought was massive. Mm-hmm. The introduction of Andrew Garfield for me was the next big, like, sort of massive thing for me. Yeah. If not on a par, I think this guy's pretty amazing.
Well, exactly. That's how they crafted this movie so well. You have that gasp of the death of Aunt May, and you get that kind of feeling of, oh wow, okay, we've got the two Spider-Man coming back in here into this movie. It's that lovely build back up you need to have in a movie when you've just lost a major character that's supposed to affect you considerably. I will say I'm not a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but Andrew Garfield was never the reason for that. Andrew Garfield is a great Spider-Man. He's a great actor. Really enjoyed him in those movies. Enjoyed the villain actors as well. Everybody that played the villains, they're just really bad movies. They're pretty much a bit of a mess in comparison to some of the other movies we watched in the MCU. For me, and that's just my
no. There's definitely script. There's definitely script and narrative issues in the films,
but it's definitely not Andrew Garfield. He is not the reason, and they really do give him a great opportunity in this movie to talk about his character and his version, his portrayal of him. You know, I kind of think at this point, Spider-Man is getting onto the side of Doctor Who, like we have over here in Europe, Doctor Who, with many, many people giving their takes on the character. This is a way in the US of having Spider-Man played by multiple characters, in the same way that Into the Spider-Verse is many, many versions of different Peter Parkers and how they approach it. Here we get some great moments with Andrew Garfield talking about his version of the character, with Tom Holland even talking about his version of the character, and of course with Tobey Maguire talking about his version of the character, and why they're all different and why they all approach life in a different way.
And if none of our listeners have ever watched Doctor Who, there's a fantastic one, was The Day of the Doctor, where you had multiple Doctor Who's all meeting in one spot. It's
their big anniversary episode every decade. They have one that meets up as many of the Doctors that they get together at the same time.
And there was one where it was brilliant. It was David Tennant, Matt Smith, and John Hurt as three Doctors of all different styles. Still Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. Anyway, moving on, because you talked about, we had the crushing defeat of Aunt May. We had this woohoo moment with the introduction of the Spider-Man. And when they go to find Peter, this is the bit where my heart just started to snap and then was slowly just stitched together with this beautiful dialogue where you have basically Tom Holland's Peter Parker like embraced by Ned and MJ, and we get this introduction. You get that scene. You get that glimpse of just the two Spider-Men up on top of the tower and jumping down. Yeah. It was just so cool. Good. And then this back and forth on with great power was back and forth on that, because Andrew Garfield couldn't save his Gwen Stacy. He's been led down a path of vengeance and anger, and he's been going on, and he's an angry Spider-Man, and he's vicious.
Exactly.
And you get Tobey Maguire talking about his Uncle Ben death.
Yeah.
And how he still killed that man. The man still died.
Yeah.
And you get all this back and forth on this, and you get how these different versions and narratives and designs of the stories of the Spider-Man origin, and how then they to a degree, we always joked we've never seen Spider-Man or Tom Holland Spider-Man. We haven't seen his origin. We don't need to, because these three films are his origin now, because they are the breadth of his learning to become what at the end of this film is Spider-Man. Like, exactly. He is that.
Exactly. Like, people speculate that, I guess Uncle Ben died and told him great power comes great responsibility. They just didn't want to show that in the Sony universe for the third time kind of thing. But what they're saying here is whatever that moment is that happened to those characters, that's the one that set them on the path that they're on for the rest of their life. And what happens here in the death of May is going to set Tom Holland's Spider-Man on the path that he's going to be on for the rest of his life. I thought it was really interesting. You mentioned it there, but I thought it was really interesting that Garfield's version of Peter Parker is saying the death of Gwen Stacy is what set him on his path. Yes, he lost Uncle Ben in the same way, and that was a traumatic moment for him, but the loss of Gwen Stacy was something that pushed him even further down the path that he went on. So I thought that was a really interesting way of telling his story slightly differently than what we may have thought of watching those movies. Andrew Garfield is given so many great emotional moments throughout the rest of the movie here. I think he's really well served by the script. Yeah. There's a lot of love for him and a lot of love for all of the characters, but I think he's given some great moments.
Yeah, definitely.
The movie from here on,
and I'm really pleased about that. To be honest, I think he deserves it, and so does Tobey Maguire. I mean, I think he was really good. The only thing with Tobey Maguire, it just felt like since Spider-Man 3, he somehow hadn't been in front of a camera since then. I don't know what it was, but that was how he did Spider-Man, actually. So it's probably just that. It's more the recollection, I guess. And I was also just surprised potentially we didn't get more. I was half expecting Miles at one stage because of having Andrew Garfield's and Tobey Maguire's. I thought they were going to kind of introduce Miles Morales, to be honest. I guess fantastic. There's rights elements, but nonetheless, I thought him. There's Ben Reilly as well. So I was thinking, where are they going to stop with this? But I'm actually glad they kept it to that core 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like we mentioned the kind of meta commentary of Tom Holland becoming a really famous person in the world, coming out of, being in stage plays. He was in Billy Elliot on the West End and then became Spider-Man and has exploded across the world. That's kind of the meta commentary on his Spider-Man. I really liked that they incorporated Andrew Garfield's experience, which was he was a massive fanatic. He absolutely loved Spider-Man. He turned up dressed as Spider-Man at some comic conventions, kind of showing off how much he loved the character. And unfortunately, just due to how much pressure was on the character and how much pressure Sony were putting on him at the time, it ended off not being a great experience for him. And that's how his character feels in this movie. It feels like he doesn't have the excitement and joy of being Spider-Man. And I feel like he comes out of the movie with a bit more of that excitement and joy, taking that on board from Tom Holland. I kind of like that they incorporated that in the story. It's a tough thing to stick some real life experience into a movie, isn't it? But I think they did a really good job on that. And I know we did joke really about Tobey Maguire feeling like he hasn't acted in a while because of his version of Peter Parker here. But that actually plays in quite well with the experience that Tobey Maguire has had. He's very well remembered for that character, but he's been in Oscar-nominated movies after Spider-Man. He's had a career after Spider-Man. But that's all he's really remembered for. That was his time in the marquee cinema, let's say.
Yeah,
back
exactly.
In the day. And he has moved on. He has done other work since then. But I think it works for his character to be someone that feels like they haven't been on screens, not the kind of meta piece they feel like they've built into his character in the movie. But absolutely love this and love the idea of having it just kept to those 3. You're entirely right, John. There's hundreds of other versions. We could have had all the versions that we saw in the Into the Spider-Verse cartoon. We could have brought those all into live action.
Spider-Pig could have oinked his way through the multiverse.
Yeah. But I would have loved a little nod to Nicholas Hammond, our 70s Spider-Man. I would love if he just popped in there at some point as well. That would have been cool.
I'm glad they kept it to the 3 because it was perfectly timed for who this was and what the story was. But then we get the Science Bros.
Yes, we do.
Which, God, I love this scene. It was just so much fun. Mm-hmm. Let's for a second take out the Ned situation, right? Because Ned's all, have you got a guy in the chair? Have you got a best friend? Me? And it's like, no, my best friend turned into a villain. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh my God. And like, because for comic book or non-comic book fans, the character of Ned Leeds becomes a hobgoblin in the comic books. Although in the Ned from the MCU is more of the Genki from the Ultimate Universe, Miles Morales' best friend.
Exactly.
So he's a bit of a mix, but he won't become a villain. He's now on the path to become a Sorcerer Supreme. But this Science Bros moment was great fun because you got the reenactment, and this is where I giggled. I actually audibly giggled a bit. Was the Peter Parker? No, my Peter. No, the Peter. The Peter, other Peter.
Yeah.
We're all Peter Parker. Just this back and forth was just a nice narrative version of the meme of 3 Spider-Men pointing at each other.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It was just a fun take on that, and it worked. It worked really well. And then you got the weird webs, and I was wondering if they'd address this. Which is, your body just makes them?
Yeah, that was
like,
cool. I love
all
that.
This coming out, all these little...
Does it come out of any other place?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
because
good.
that's all the stuff that we've had... I know we've had these conversations between the 3 of us ourselves, asking about, like, when we went through the Spider-Man films before and we talked about the organic webs, we've asked, maybe he webs from somewhere else. Like, it was so on the nose, tongue-in-cheek. But it was also, and it's one of the things the MCU does well, when these writers for the MCU come in, they pull in a lot of the conversations that the actual viewers themselves are having.
Absolutely.
And embed those into the stories.
And well done for them this year to put out a show like What If, which every single episode was talking about that every possibility you can imagine is out there in a multiverse. So the idea that we have got a Spider-Man that creates webs internally in his body is a possibility. So therefore, that's part of the multiverse. You know, they set it up really well for people to understand it in these movies. But yeah, great to have them all together. Great to have the side spurs together. And great to have them all teaming up together versus all the villains in our incursion number 4, the battle of the brand new Statue of Liberty. Do you guys know that I had to actually edit out a piece of feedback that we got for Hawkeye during the week, because there was a mention in Hawkeye this week of from Yelena Belova where she says she wants to visit the brand new and improved Statue of Liberty, which is a reference to this movie. It's a reference to Spider-Man, and I love that they kept the references in the movie as well. We heard a radio conversation going on where somebody was complaining about this brand new and improved Statue of Liberty. There's a conversation going on going, why are they attaching the Captain America shield to the Statue of Liberty? So that's all in there. I love that that's in there, but I did have to edit it out of our Hawkeye podcast because I didn't want to spoil anything for anybody, because all the jokes work in here and all the surprise appearances work in here. So really good, but a great location. We had this location used in X-Men, if you remember, the battle sequence that happened in there in the first X-Men movie. So returning back to Statue of Liberty, but slightly changed for Spider-Man.
And one interesting thing on the statue, time-wise, the end of this film is at Christmas. Mm-hmm. So because it's winter and it's snowing and everything like that, and that's where we are in Hawkeye. So the actual destruction of this Statue of Liberty happens before Christmas, before Hawkeye. So we do now know that the shield is put back up on the Statue of Liberty by Christmas. So just a nice little, was like, oh, that's funny.
Well, the thing that I was thinking as well was that you didn't have all the shanty boats around the base of it. Like they should have done.
Out,
No, it's dreadful. They've evicted these people that have been like shantying around the base of.
And for anyone wondering, that's the Endgame reference where we saw where back in Endgame you had lots of shanty boats all around Ellis Island.
Well, you'd hope that the world would return to a little bit more normality now that the world has been restored. So people have been returned to the earth. So all those people living in shanty boats hopefully will get their homes back. So that's possibly what
you
happened.
will not live here.
Exactly. But the battle itself that takes place here between the 3 Spider-Men versus the villains, I love how this is set up and really makes sense in the storytelling that, you know, they kind of leave the big villains of Tobey Maguire to Tobey Maguire. They kind of leave the big villains of Andrew Garfield to Andrew Garfield. You know, I think that's a really good way of doing it, with Tom Holland jumping in and out and helping them out and helping to fix the ones he created. Like in this case, Electro is considered his villain because he's got the arc reactor. So I love that they separate them out that way for it, just to give us a good shot of each of these characters as their Spider-Man doing their spider thing in this movie. Great fun.
I mean, except at the end, you know, they leave it to Peter Parker #1, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, because they are ranked as well. They do actually rank them. Toby being #2, and then Andrew #3. But that because of Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, killing Aunt May, that it is left to this universe's Spider-Man to deal with the Green Goblin. And I really enjoyed that because, again, it's back to the point of seeing Tom Holland, just how visceral, desolate he was and how he portrayed that. And there is a sense here of, like, is he going to kill him? And you know that that's not the case, but he really sells it. And then you get the Cure coming in where he cures him to get this sort of regretful, quivering Norman Osborn. So I really, really enjoyed just how that played out. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
For me, what really just made my heart sing was the 3 of them swinging in, where you had the 3 of them swing, land, and then go. And it was just all of them in there, their versions of their iconic poses.
Absolutely. From
the comic books, from the films. And just, again, seeing them. Because you just also got this family discussion I always wanted brothers. And this, we're just like, you're like, all right, let's do this. And then the first thing happens and they all get their ass whooped.
Well, yes, but there are two great things that come out of those conversations. I absolutely love the fact that they all admit that they're used to working alone, so they're not very good at teaming up with anybody else. I think that's great, and I love Tom Holland's the one that takes the lead on that. His version of Peter Parker has worked with the Avengers, remember? And the response of, who's the Avengers? What is that? Great fun. Love that they incorporate that, and love that he's been a part of the team, so he knows how to work in a team and teaches them, just follow my lead, and we all take out, left, right, and center. It all works really well. But the other great moment as well, when they're kind of comparing experiences, I absolutely love that with Tom Holland saying, I've been to space to fight a space monster. Tobey Maguire going, a space monster came to Earth to fight me, and Andrew Garfield going, I've never fought anybody in space. I've never gone to space at all. I'm a terrible Spider-Man. I'm not even on your level. And Tobey Maguire saying, the iconic, but you're amazing. You are amazing. Yeah. Love it to incorporate it into that world.
Really good.
Really good.
The whole thing was just fantastic. But we see the beatdown. The beatdown happens. They learn their lesson to trust in each other and trust in their spider sense. Everything starts to work together. We see Ned come in. We see MJ come in. The plan kind of starts to work, and it does work then. And the reintroduction of Doctor Strange. And then it's all going
stuck
great.
In the mirror dimension for hours and days on end.
Hanging upside down. I did like how Peter managed to essentially use math to stop Doctor Strange.
Yeah, that was fun. Pretty cool, actually. Yeah. That was a nice nerdy thing to do.
Yeah,
I love.
It's like, oh my god, it's just geometry.
Yeah, exactly.
But it kind of all culminates in the end battle, which is Green Goblin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it won't happen. This is the one where Tom Holland should get at least an Oscar Academy Award nom for his role as Peter Parker. It won't happen, but you can see the emotion and the
That's not going to happen.
John's still laughing because he knows Academy members do not sit through 15 minutes of genre movies. There's no way they would get
it will never. It will never happen. But because the overall just intensity and passion and emotion on Tom Holland's face as he beats down Willem Dafoe. And on top of that, then the sound as the cracks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just the choice of the angles, because it's all... A lot of the shots are taken from below of, say, where it would be Willem Dafoe's looking up at Tom Holland as he is beating down. It's like off the center, essentially. But it was just so visceral as it continues to cut. Mm-hmm. And then taking the glider and replicating the death of the Goblin from Spider-Man 1 on being basically impaled on his glider.
Yeah.
Taking that as well, and then seeing Maguire step in. Yeah. Just this again for me, it was just... guys, I know I'm going to continue just kind of... Gushing on this film, because it was just that. It was seeing, Toby going, no, you can't do this. You can't take that next step. You can't take a life.
Exactly. And it's not just, of course, a reference to Spider-Man 1. That's how Aunt May was killed, was because the glider hit her. So he is using the weapon that killed Aunt May to try and kill Green Goblin. It would have pushed him over the edge. But yeah, you're right. That is it's a great moment, a great ending to all of these battles. And Doctor Strange coming back, to this world to basically close down everything and send all of them back to their respective multiverses is how the big CGI extravaganza ends, let's say, at the end of this movie. I love how much Stephen Strange cares for Peter Parker. I love that that's incorporated into the movie. He's considered to be, as we've always said, a very arrogant kind of character that doesn't have very many friends. But I love that they did incorporate the respect he has for Peter Parker for doing what he does.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think it's... what's really nice here at the end is with between Stephen and Peter is that you had the running joke of him saying, Peter calling him sir, and he goes, no, call me Stephen. And it's like, no, that sounds strange. And Peter calls him sir again. And it's in this moment, despite the fact that he's been locked away in a mirror dimension for quite a while, because of math. He comes here and he says, you have Peter saying, sir, and he's like, no, call me Stephen. It still sounds a little strange, but call me Stephen. And I think this is that point where you probably have that closer relationship.
Well, yeah.
That you would have seen in the animation, for example, and you would have gotten from the comics and so on. But I think this is, for me, it's just, I'm always like so happy when I see these two characters together because they're both, Doctor Strange, my favorite, but Spider-Man, is absolutely up there. I love it. It really just reminds me of just how phenomenal Ditko was. And to effectively, these two characters, in effect, are kind of like both extremes of the spectrum in many respects, in terms of age, in terms of, one's a medical doctor, one's a school student, but they both have this idea of learning and all this kind of stuff that kind of is where they go, because Tom Holland is that personal guy. It is that Stephen is much more detached, but they kind of come together because they deal in the neighborhoods, and they're both people that are looking to learn about themselves, and having that little moment on top of the Statue of Liberty really just felt like it brought that connection together for these two Ditko characters. I really, really loved it, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why it was brought together is even more important. The idea that effectively Strange was saying, send them back to their universes and fate will take its way and they will all be dead. But the fact that Peter chose to save them, to use his knowledge and the knowledge of everybody else around him to save all of these people who had this terrible end through no fault of their own, through falling into a vat of eels, for example, or getting sprayed in the face by a gas. He was able to save every one of them, and the respect that comes from Stephen for him making that decision and following through and finding another way around something that Stephen wouldn't have even considered is what I think has developed that relationship between the two. And I think that's a really important character development between the two of them specifically. Again, as Steve Ditko Creations, creating that kind of balance between the two of them.
That's
and
it.
Giving them something to have some respect between them.
Doctor Strange would be happy that he was foiled by math. That's the thing. He would think fair dues. So it was really nice. Yeah. Really
the other thing that very much defines these two characters is the growth through personal sacrifice.
Yeah.
So we see it with Strange and Clea, and we see it with all his love interests and all of his hands. And every time Doctor Strange has to have a massive learning, there's some form of sacrifice. And it is the same with Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And it is solidified in this last few minutes of this film.
Yeah.
Like the decision of Peter Parker, Tom Holland, do it. Everyone must forget Peter Parker. Peter Parker is no more by the end of this. And that taking that choice is just... If you had have asked me on an ending and gave me a multiple choice, this would have been always the last one I would have chose. And because the odds, you're essentially wiping Peter Parker from the MCU. To a degree. You're keeping Spider-Man, but Peter Parker, in who he has been to date, and his involvement with everyone, Spider-Man's still there, but his involvement as Peter Parker is no more.
Exactly.
As of right now.
Exactly, and isn't that great? It just takes it back to a personal story and his personal experiences. It's absolutely horrible for Peter Parker. His girlfriend doesn't remember him. His best friend that's been around all his life doesn't remember him. Happy Hogan doesn't remember him, as we see later on. So anybody that he's had an interaction with as Peter Parker doesn't remember him. But they will remember the hero that is Spider-Man.
Yes.
They will remember what he did for the world within Endgame and within all the rest of the movies and all the rest of the things that he's done. But they just won't remember Peter Parker. It's really interesting because, again, if you bring it back to that personal story of the moving on from high school, moving into college, you're moving into a new world where you may not know anybody at all and nobody knows you. You're moving from being a big fish in a small pond sometimes to being a small fish in a big pond. And that's effectively what's happened to Peter Parker. He's moving out. He no longer has his Aunt May. He's no longer living in the apartment, no longer has a connection to Happy, no girlfriend, no best friend.
Yeah.
And he's moving back in, as you pointed out, Chris, after we watched the movie, back into the apartment that Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker had back in Spider-Man 1. He's moving into this really small apartment in New York. So on his own, completely anonymous, nobody knows who he is, and definitely nobody knows he has a connection to Spider-Man. So I really like this choice. And it can be confusing because it feels quite similar to what the original spell was. Let the world forget that I'm Spider-Man was the original spell. This one is let the world forget who Peter Parker is. Massive sacrifice, but a different spell.
It was the only way because I'm assuming the same spell can't be done twice. So it was kind of this, okay, so just forget it. And it just, that level of sacrifice that goes on where he's like, I'm going to find you guys and I will remind you guys. And then that choice, which is no. So with this great power comes a responsibility. I can't keep putting my friends in danger. I can't have the guy in the chair. Yeah. They're level setting Spider-Man to the comic book Spider-Man, where it was always Spider-Man. Later on, MJ. But it was always that duality of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. There were two characters of the same person, but two characters different. Batman and Bruce Wayne. It was they were separate. And that's what we're going back to. And essentially at this, we get a brand new suit, which we barely see. Mm-hmm. We see it to a degree, but it's dark. And I'm like, hopefully we get a better version of it. But they're essentially restarting what we assume potentially when all the contracts and all the behind the business work is done. They're going to have a new era of Spider-Man where he's out. He's no longer... He can join the Daily Bugle as essentially a photographer. They can take some of those cues of the old Spider-Man and bring him in because he is now. We can get a Gwen Stacy. We can get all these other They can do all these other things, and the reason this is important to me is because I was pretty sure that this was the end.
Right.
Like. I thought we were going to get a hiatus for another 5-6 years of Spider-Man. Because I thought, all right, what they'll do, they'll need to wait for the rights, they'll need to figure something out, brand new team, spin it all up again, brand new Spider-Man, can't have him in the MCU, blah, 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 because it's just too convoluted. The joy of this is they've level set, they've reset everything. Bar Spider-Man. But the bar Spider-Man being Spider-Man.
Exactly. And that's what I love about this. This gives them great opportunities to do whatever they want to. They can do a movie where it's Spider-Man not in the MCU. They can do a movie with Spider-Man in the MCU. No problem at all. The personal relationships is the big thing. And really what this gives an opportunity for is Zendaya, who is absolutely massive. Her own TV show, her own production company, where she doesn't have to return for another Spider-Man movie. Not saying she doesn't want to, but she has the opportunity to move on from this if she wants to. And Sony can do whatever they want with this character, whether that be in the MCU or not. But it gives them so many great possibilities. That's exactly where you want to be with someone, especially as loved as Tom Holland is as this character. You want to give them opportunities to do whatever they want to. So I like that. This is a trilogy, definitely. And there may be another trilogy in the future, featuring the character played by Tom Holland. It may be just MCU appearances or maybe something completely separate crossovers of all the other Sony movies. But I love this choice.
We were just before we started recording. For me, there was this rumor for a while that this film would introduce Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly is a clone of Spider-Man who currently is Spider-Man in the comic books. But he is a clone of Spider-Man that is the kind of Scarlet Spider. I thought, and it was a rumor that he was going to be in this. I didn't believe it. And I actually think that the rumor got it slightly wrong. I think at the end of this, you have no more Peter Parker. I think the next film, you could see Peter Parker, Tom Holland, saying his name is Ben Reilly.
Maybe.
And using that because Reilly was... There was a whole rationale reason why it's Ben Reilly. But I think that's where they got this rumor came from.
I think it'd be really good if that was the case, because again, as well, it's the connection with Uncle Ben, and so on. Like it feels really natural, and quite a nice way of establishing that new
next
name.
trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd need to, though, because his name's Peter Parker. Nobody remembers who Peter Parker is, so why would you change his name? It's exactly the same as him calling himself Ben Reilly. Nobody knows.
It's true, there is
Parker
multiple Chris Joneses out there in the world.
Exactly.
But actually, for now, because we are much like Highlanders, we have to kind of keep battling until there is just one of us.
Chris Jones,
one Chris Jones. And then I have all that power.
But that's it. The one thing I was wondering about the spell is, does it also lead to the written word, in that there's this entire school going... Who's Peter Parker? Yet they've got a record on him.
It probably will. It's magic. You see, the written word just disappears like ash.
Yeah, there could be that element, in the historical record of library cards or whatever. I don't know, but
if you want to know a little bit more about how that works, I recommend you go and read the brand new series Devil's Reign from Marvel, which kicks off with a story about Kingpin and a character who has wipes themselves from other people's memories.
That is true.
That does tell you how the written word is dealt with in the MCU when someo's
nice
is wiped from all that. So exactly.
Okay, yeah, that
exactly.
one.
Don't want to spoil it.
Yes.
You guys have a read. It's only brand new. The first issue's just come out last week, but it's really, really good. And John obviously doesn't even remember because it's been wiped from his memory by Doctor Strange.
I have read that comic, so there is that way. But again, I just thought that was mine. I hadn't caught how the written form was dealt with.
I will tell you after the podcast. I guess no point in spoiling a book that's only just come out. First issue just came out a couple of weeks ago, and a brand new book with lots and lots of connections going on, but a really good tie-in really to Spider-Man No Way Home as well. Will we talk about just some of the post-credit scenes, just some of the extra things that
Please
happened in the
do.
movie?
So the very first one, it's Venom. This is how we get the Venom in the MCU. Great Tom Hardy performance again as Eddie Brock and Venom. Just being those two people, it's huge amounts of fun. And then he's zapped back to his own universe. We'll understand why in Venom 3, or kind of one of the other multiversal ones. Mm-hmm. But a piece of the symbiote is left behind.
Yes, a really interesting one, isn't it? That again could lead to something in a Spider-Man 4, I guess. That could turn into the Venom suit, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's very much because it was very interested in Peter Parker at the initial part and the Spider-Man. So interested to see where that goes. And it's a nice one. It will probably be something small.
Yeah.
And we just then get a new Venom.
Yeah, and weirdly ties in with Venom Let There Be Carnage, because we haven't seen Tom Hardy and Tom Holland in any movies together, so it's interesting how it ties in there.
Yeah, it was good. It was good fun. The first post credit, really enjoyed it. Loved Tom Hardy as Venom. But whatever his name is. But yeah, really, really enjoyed that. It was good.
The Lethal Protector. But then we get the second one. And I am not going to take this. I've just gushed for the last hour and a half about my massive film. John, do you want to tell us about the second post-credit scene?
I wasn't expecting it, to be honest, at all. I mean, I was probably expecting a second post-credit, but effectively getting Multiverse of Madness trailer in here. And I think the big thing for me is the notion that it's not Wanda that causes it. It seems to be that things continue to develop after the end of this movie. And you have actually that nice little sequence of Stephen Strange walking through saying, "I wasn't expecting this," and him actually going to Wanda for advice. She seems to be in a pretty good place, to be honest. I think she's picking apples or whatever Scarlet Witches do, I guess. Maybe it's the poisonous apple, or something. Or it's, leg of frog and tail of newt or whatever that she's,
core of apple.
Core of apple. So that was really interesting surprise for me. I am so pleased that Strange Supreme was in there from What If, or it seems like him anyway, with the muted colours. Because with Sam Raimi on board, his horror past, it just felt nicely dark, muted, atmospheric, and Mordo with dreads was cool. So it's really good to see Mordo back as well, and we do get the one-eyed monster with his tentacles. Are these the ones that we've seen in What If?
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes.
Exactly. You do wonder, is Shemra Gorath this tentacled, pretty powered and pretty hefty magical being in the world of Strange? So, potentially, I really want to see just how they use this. Because, it's an odd creature. How would you get that across to audiences? Is it going to be played, tongue-in-cheek, a bit like we've had in this movie in a good way? Or is it going to be some kind of serious threat? But it seems like Mordo is part of this. Interestingly enough, though, it is Mordo with dreads. And I was saying, that's cool, assuming it's the same Mordo from that universe, because he is with Strange Supreme, who is from a different universe. This is the other great thing about it. I'm kind of looking at characters going, oh, it's awesome, Mordo with dreads. He's grown them out. And I'm going, but this could just be a completely different universe. He might not even be seeking to reduce the number of sorcerers on the planet, because it could be a different Mordo with a different reason for being.
I love it. We have learned nothing from the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer. We are still going to speculate on a trailer for a movie out in a year and a half's time, even though a wink was cut out of the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer and changed the entirety of the concept of what we thought was going to happen for Doctor Strange. But we'll still speculate, apparently.
Oh, it is 100%, because my speculation is that they're pulling in all the different Sorcerer Supremes, and essentially Mordo is Sorcerer Supreme in his universe. The Sorcerer Supreme is the evil Doctor Strange is his one, so they pull him in. They're pulling in multiple different the sorcerers in order to try and save the multiverse. All of the different.
But the interesting thing, if there is a continuity there, well, then currently, Strange Supreme is looking after and making sure that the end of the multiverse doesn't actually happen from Ultron and from Killmonger. So is it even him? I don't know. Or are we going to get a really nice little thing where in a mirror dimension there's going to be two little characters fighting it out or suspended? Because that would be really
if
quite
they
awesome.
do that, I want to hear like that really high pitch.
Or it could just be a wonderful way to reintroduce Killmonger and Ultron back into the universe. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah. Any final notes to go through for the episode, guys?
None from me.
I think we have to make reference to the fact that MJ falling off the building, which in the trailers felt like this could be the Gwen Stacy moment for Tom Holland. This could be the fact that his girlfriend dies and he can't save her, and that she is saved by Andrew Garfield in that scene. Another great emotional moment for the Andrew Garfield version of Peter Parker. I thought that was fantastically done as he jumps out from beneath Tom Holland, who couldn't have saved MJ. I thought that was a great scene. We just didn't get the chance to talk about in the episode. Anything else?
Very quickly, just the figures that are in the sky during the incursion at the end. There's 100% people there. There's silhouettes abound. We did not have our phones during the screening, and or at the end of the screening.
We wouldn't have been filming the movie,
sorry, excuse me. I did not mean filming. In to take a note of kind of. So there are probably additional notes as well, and there's Easter eggs galore in this film.
Well, I thought one was an ostrich. It had a very long neck.
No, but that we figured this out after the screening. That it wasn't a long neck; it was a staff. Mm-hmm. But I think there was a load of different. There was definitely some winks and nods to other. Multiversal characters.
Most definitely winks and nods.
Absolutely. And the fact that we did get a reference to WandaVision, the actual TV show from Doctor Strange mentioning Westview to Wanda in the trailer for Multiverse of Madness, the fact that we do get possibly the Sorcerer Supreme from What If, it does make me think that what we were seeing up there when people get the chance to pause it, when they have it at home on home viewing or have seen it 10 times in the cinema, those are going to be characters that we may have seen in What If or in in Loki that will appear there. I'm sure I saw Ice Giant Loki up there in the sky, but it was up there for just a couple of seconds and we couldn't pause it in the cinema or else the rest of the patrons would
be like, "Oi, projector man, can you stop it for a second?"
Yeah, Pac-Man was there.
But there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow defenders and everyone in between. We have come to the end of this podcast because we have to do one more thing before we get to feedback. Derek, do you defend Spider-Man No Way Home?
Yep, I absolutely defend it. Fantastic. Best of the live-action Spider-Man movies and almost up there with the Spider-Verse as the best of the Spider-Man movies so far. Absolutely loved it. A great send-off for Tom Holland if it's the last of his Spider-Man movies, but also a great platform to have more Tom Holland Spider-Man movies or more MCU Spider-Man movies. Really, really good job from the writers here. Excellent.
Joners, do you defend Spider-Man No Way Home?
I really do. Loved this movie. Would give it 4.5 multiverses out of 5. It's just it all came together really nicely. It had the Spider guys coming through from their universes, which I loved. There was the wham bam emotional punch of Aunt May, and just I think Tom Holland was superb in terms of how he navigated through this entire movie. Thought Willem Dafoe was chef's kiss. Everything about this, as I say, I probably docked it half a mark because from my own point of view is it just took a while to warm up for me and to get everything connecting, but I just then it just sprung in and I loved the heart, soul, writing, directing, performing, everything around this. So I absolutely do defend Spider-Man No Way Home.
Fantastic.
Chris, do you defend this movie?
Of course I do. There's no if, buts, or maybes, or anything in between. I'd be up there. I am up there. This is my favorite Spider-Man film, just below Spider-Verse. Just below. And I say in any given day, this could overtake or just drop to first. We'll call it almost joint first, but as of right now, Spider-Verse is still my favorite. Just for what it does, the nostalgia factor, the giving each of the different Spider-Men a fitting end and a fitting closure to each of their storylines, even more so than what we got in their previous films for the other two Spider-Men. Giving the villains, giving Doc Ock a second kind of comeback moment, rehabilitation moment, just beautiful, and for everything else in between. I will still always gasp at that death of Aunt May and everything else. It's going to be tough rewatching. My only hope is maybe a February release on Disney Plus. 45 days, maybe. But I'd say more than likely it'll probably just end of Feb. They may even hold it a bit longer to give it a bit more time in the cinema over Christmas. But there you go. Those are our thoughts.
Good stuff.
On Spider-Man No Way Home. But do you know what? Some of you have thoughts. And some of you have gone over to facebook.com/group/TV Podcast Industries to give us your feedback there. First up, we have some feedback from Sandy Resendez, who said, "Can't wait to hear your thoughts. I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people will say it was all fan service. I'm here from that. I never expected Andrew and Toby to be in there as long as they were. And I thought William Dafoe was great. He seemed to pick up right where he left off. I loved Spidey's classic costume at the end. Lastly, Matt Murdock. I know it was quick, but it was all I needed. Anyway, I thought it was great. Not sure I'd rewatch this one over and over like I do with the other Marvel movies, but I did really enjoy it, and it was everything I expected and wanted." Yes, I'll take it back because I briefly went over it. The Spidey suit at the end, that more luminous blue and kind of the shiny red, just fantastic. And I really just want a better view on that, and I'm hoping kind of in the next 2 to 3 weeks, whereas they start to give a bit more kind of additional imagery, because a lot of the storylines and everything will have already got out there. I can't wait to see some of that. Andrew Pack, who is one of the concept artists on Disney, he will probably release something because he did work on this one as well, I believe. So he usually after a while starts to introduce some of what their concept art out onto Instagram and stuff, and it's beautiful.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sandy, for feedback. Yeah, really, really good to hear from you. And you're totally right. I know people might say this movie was fan service, but we're here for that. We're fans, right? So who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy, for the feedback. Dan Lee says, comedy, emotion, action, nostalgia. This has it all. I've seen it twice now, and it's way up there with my favourite Marvel films. The small cameo from Mr. Murdock was fantastic and made me very excited for a future Daredevil series. The cynical part of my brain is wondering if Sony has made everyone forget about Peter so they can yank him out of the MCU if need be, but I hope that's not the case. I found the Venom tease interesting, as they can literally go anywhere with that character now, and the Multiverse of Madness teaser looks suitably nuts with a nice nod to the What If Doctor Strange episode. Yes, indeed, Dan, it does look suitably nuts, does Multiverse of Madness. And quite frankly, with Venom and Tom Hardy, that is equally slightly nuts as well, I think. But yeah, the two end credit scenes were just really, really good. I'm there 100% with you that this has it all in terms of the nostalgia, the action, the comedy, the emotion, the Mr. Murdock, you name it. And yeah, it's interesting if that's a ploy of Sony, but I guess as partners in this, then it's also something that Marvel Studios would have agreed to in terms of their involvement and use of like Doctor Strange within the franchise. So I guess it's both ways if that's the case.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know Sony probably don't want to be held over a barrel for any much longer if they can possibly avoid it as well. We also got an email in from Coffee and Vodka who's similar thoughts about the breakup of Sony and the MCU. He says, "Greetings, MIT-bound defenders. The layers of No Way Home began with the title. Broken down, it means that Tom Holland's Spider-Man has no more solo films outside the Spider-Verse and only one last contracted appearance within the MCU. With Sony and Disney unable to come to an agreement, Spidey's stuck in the former with no way to get home to the latter. The second layer of this is the heavy inclusion of Spider-Verse villains, only a brief appearance of Wong and Doctor Strange, only in long enough to erase the memory of Peter's presence from the MCU. The third is the appearance of the movie, all the visual slickness of Disney's Marvel with the B-movie feel of Sony's Marvel. It seemed to have been written under the instructions to produce a visually interesting legal separation document. That said, it was great to see Mr. Murdock, especially after Kingpin's appearance in Hawkeye this week. Hopefully this means the way is open for Jessica Jones and Luke Cage as well. With Aunt May dead due to Peter's lack of good judgment, Team Strange forever, he can now be a properly tragic storied Spidey. As for the bit of the symbiote left behind, hoping it ends up in Feige's capable hands as part of the settlement. 2 symbolically dropped cap shields out of 5. Peace and take care, Coffee and Vodka. Thanks so much, Coffee and Vodka. Yeah, I don't think I saw it through that lens at all. I was too busy enjoying my bouncing on my chair at the excitement of having all the Spider-Verse villains and Spider-Men in the movie as well. But I hope when you go and get a chance to watch the movie again, you can see it for its own story and what it was trying to deliver in here. I think there's a lot more to it than it just being a separation of Sony and the MCU.
Yeah, I really don't see that. I think everyone went into that thinking this. I think we wouldn't have got what we got. We do know now, post the event, post the premiere and stuff, that there is very high level discussions happening with the CEO of Sony, for example, and Bob Iger about where they go next. And we do know there is definitely at least one more Tom Holland contractual obligation show up. That's probably going to be into the Spider-Verse 2, but they are talking, Amy Pascal said they're already high level thinking about a new trilogy. I think they'll do, if anything, it will be another trilogy, and then that will be the end of the Sony Spider-Man, etc., etc. And also, who knows, there might be a Daredevil film in the future. But thanks for the email. Back over on Facebook, we have another piece of feedback from Kelly Resendez, who says, "This movie was amazing!" Pun intended. The story was fantastic. The comedy, the lightheartedness, the emotion, and all the feels. The action scenes were some of my favourite of all time. While not my favourite MCU film, as I place it maybe top 10 or thereabouts, it is my favourite Spider-Man film so far. The Doctor Strange involvement was not what I expected and didn't add anything to the movie for me other than one of the best action sequences of the film. The fact that we got Matt Murdock was great, and their reaction to his catch was hilarious. No matter what he is doing, I love Jon Favreau's Happy Hogan. Poor Happy. Yes, very much poor Happy. Like, he is by himself by the end of this. No one, he has Tony's kid and Pepper Potts, and that's it. There is no one else. He has no Aunt May, and he has no Peter Parker. Thank you so much, Kelly, for that. I believe we're on to our final piece of feedback, which is a voicemail from Steve Brown.
Yes, it is. Steve couldn't live Steve in the cinema, so I believe this is from the car park directly outside the cinema after watching the movie. So let's hear what Steve has to say.
Hello, TV podcast industries. This is Steve, and I just came out of Spider-Man No Way Home, and wow, so good. It's going to take multiple viewings, but gosh, so sad. Aunt May. And then that ending with everybody had to forget him. Like, the original spell was just to make them forget that he's Spider-Man, right? So why did it have to be changed at the end to where everybody just completely forgot Peter Parker? Because, like, I was thinking he still would be friends with Ned because he was friends with Ned before, and he could still meet up with MJ because he still went to school, but there at the end it showed he had the GED prep manual, which is the general education diploma or whatever that people get when they don't finish high school here in the States. So really good. Can't wait to watch it again. And that I guess it was like a preview for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness there at the very last. So can't wait to hear you guys talk about it, and I hope I get this in time. Talk to you later. Oh, and that had to be Strange Supreme right there at the end with the very dark hair and everything of that.
Yes, it was, we think. Strange Supreme at the end. That was very cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think with the GED, I think that's where I think it's like Peter Parker's no more, so he has to go under his new identity and get a brand new education, or at least file it out for an education. But he's a smart kid; he'll do fine. It's all right.
We're speculating that the reason he had to cast a different spell was because he can't cast the same spell exactly twice.
Or some variation of that. It was that kind of like you can cast the same one, but this one is so broken it has to be different now.
There's definitely multiple viewings though, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh god, yes.
Absolutely, and thanks so much, Steve, for sending in your voicemail. Really good of you directly after watching the movie. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yes, it does have a little sad feeling coming out of the cinema as well at the end of Peter's story. Thanks so much to everybody for listening to our discussion of Spider-Man No Way Home, and thanks to everybody that sent in your feedback as well. I know we didn't give anybody any time to get it in, but we do have to get this out as a podcast before Christmas, basically. So we hope you've enjoyed listening to us discuss Spider-Man No Way Home. Home. But we'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts about No Way Home, please email us to feedback@TV Podcast Industries. Or if you're following us for our other podcasts on Wheel of Time or on Hawkeye, you can email us to that same address with your thoughts about either of those two shows as well.
Yes. And we are moving into 2022. And you know what that means? We're gonna do a year in review and what's coming next podcast. So that means we'll probably have that one in early January. Keep an eye on all the socials where we'll put up a time when we're going to be kind of recording it. We'll give you a heads up if you have any overall feedback for any of the shows that we've covered in 2021 or just any general nice thoughts, discussions, whatever. Put it into us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. If you like what you heard across any of this podcast or any of our podcasts throughout 2021 or any of the shows, why not head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries where you can support us on an ongoing basis and it will be very much appreciative. Or if you just want to buy poor Derek a bit of coffee because you know what, he's been doing a lot of editing, 100 episodes in a year. It's a bit of a tough one. Head on to buymeacoffee.com/TVPI.
Absolutely. And thanks once again to everybody that supported us throughout this year and shared our podcast and commented on us and joined our Facebook group and fed back to us all their thoughts about these wonderful shows and movies that we've been covering. We will be back in the MCU next year. I think the next MCU movie is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which has been pushed out. I think we're looking at May for that movie, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And remember, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow Defenders, for joining us. Lovely chatting with you about the movies. Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.